Maria wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished cleaning the marble floors of the enormous mansion. Her hands were raw from scrubbing and her back ached from bending over all day. She had been working as a maid for Mr. Harrison, one of the city's wealthiest businessmen, for almost 2 years now. The pay was decent, but it was never enough to cover all her expenses. The mansion was like a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from every ceiling. Expensive paintings covered the walls, and furniture that cost more than most people's cars filled every room. Maria often wondered what it would be like to live in such luxury, but she quickly pushed those thoughts away. She was grateful to have a job, especially one that allowed her to send money back home to her sick mother in Mexico. Mr. Harrison was rarely home. He traveled constantly for business, leaving Maria to maintain the house with 2 other staff members. When he was around, he was polite but distant. He never raised his voice or treated her badly, which was more than she could say about some of her previous employers. Still, she felt invisible in his world of wealth and privilege. That Tuesday evening, everything changed. Maria was finishing up in the kitchen when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her sister's number from Mexico. Her heart immediately began racing because Carmen only called during emergencies. "Maria, you need to come home right away." Carmen's voice was shaking with panic. "It's Miguel. He's in the hospital, and the doctors say he needs surgery immediately." Miguel was Maria's 8-year-old son. She had left him with her sister 3 years ago when she came to America to find work. The plan was to save enough money to bring him over legally, but immigration was complicated and expensive. Every month she sent most of her salary home to support Miguel and help her mother with her medical bills. What happened to him? Maria's voice cracked as she gripped the phone tighter. He was playing soccer with his friends when he collapsed. They rushed him to the hospital, and the doctors found something wrong with his heart. They need to operate tonight, but they're asking for $20,000 up front. The insurance we have doesn't cover this type of surgery. $20,000. Maria felt the world spinning around her. She had been saving for years, but she only had about $3,000 in her bank account. Her mother's medical treatments had eaten up most of her savings over the past year. "I'll find a way," Maria whispered, though she had no idea how. "Tell the doctors to start preparing. I'll get the money somehow." After hanging up, Maria sat on the kitchen floor and cried. She had never felt so helpless in her life. Her little boy, the reason she worked so hard every day, was dying and she couldn't save him. She thought about calling her other relatives, but she knew they were all struggling financially too. She considered asking Mr. Harrison for an advance on her salary, but even if he gave her 6 months' pay in advance, it wouldn't be enough. As she sat there crying, she heard a car engine outside. Mr. Harrison was coming home earlier than expected. She quickly wiped her tears and stood up, trying to compose herself. She couldn't let him see her like this. Employees weren't supposed to bring their personal problems to work. Mr. Harrison walked through the front door, talking loudly on his phone about some business deal. He barely acknowledged Maria as she took his coat and briefcase. She could hear him discussing millions of dollars as if they were pocket change. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was a man who could solve her problem with loose change from his wallet, yet she couldn't even find the courage to ask for help. She continued cleaning, but her mind kept wandering to Miguel. Was he scared? Did he understand what was happening? She wished she could hold him and tell him everything would be okay, but she was thousands of miles away, feeling more powerless than ever. Around midnight, Mr. Harrison finally ended his phone calls. The house became quiet except for the sound of Maria's footsteps as she finished her evening tasks. She walked past the garage on her way to her small room in the basement. And that's when she saw it. Mr. Harrison's newest acquisition, a bright red Ferrari worth more than $200,000. He had bought it just last week, bragging to his friends on the phone about how it was a limited edition model. Maria had overheard him saying it was just one of 7 cars in his collection, and he probably wouldn't even drive it much. It would mostly sit in the garage like a piece of expensive art. And crazy idea began forming in Maria's mind. She tried to push it away, but it kept coming back stronger each time. The car was worth 10 times what she needed for Miguel's surgery. If she could somehow sell it quickly, she could save her son's life, but that would mean stealing from her employer. Mr. Harrison had been good to her, paying her fairly and treating her with respect. How could she betray that trust? Yet as she thought about Miguel lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying while she stood here debating morals, the choice became clearer. She spent the rest of the night pacing in her small room. Every few hours, she called Carmen for updates. The doctors were keeping Miguel stable, but they couldn't wait much longer to perform the surgery. Time was running out. By morning, Maria had made her decision. She had never stolen anything in her life, not even as a child when her family was starving. But this wasn't about greed or want. This was about survival. This was about saving the most important person in her world. She knew where Mr. Harrison kept the spare keys to all his cars. She had seen him put them in a locked drawer in his office, and she knew where he hid the key to that drawer. It would be easy to take the Ferrari while he was sleeping and be long gone before he even noticed. The plan was simple. She would drive the car to a contact her cousin had told her about, someone who bought expensive cars without asking too many questions. She would sell it for whatever she could get, wire the money to Mexico for Miguel's surgery, and then disappear. She would probably go to prison when they caught her, but at least her son would be alive. As she watched the sun rise through her small basement window, Maria knew there was no turning back. She was going to steal Mr. Harrison's Ferrari, and she was going to do it today. Maria waited until Mr. Harrison left for his morning jog. He was a creature of habit, always running the same route through the wealthy neighborhood at exactly 7 in the morning. She knew he would be gone for at least an hour, giving her enough time to execute her plan. Her hands shook as she climbed the stairs to his office. Each step felt like a betrayal, but Miguel's face kept appearing in her mind. She pictured him as a baby, taking his first steps, saying "Mama" for the first time. She remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle and watching him play with other children in the park. All those memories strengthened her resolve. The office was immaculate, like everything else in the house. Expensive leather furniture, rare books, and awards lined the walls. Behind the massive mahogany desk was a painting that Maria had always admired. She knew it hid a safe, but she wasn't interested in that. She only needed the car keys. The drawer was locked as expected. Maria retrieved the small key from behind a picture frame, where she had seen Mr. Harrison hide it months ago. Her conscience screamed at her to stop, but she forced herself to continue. This wasn't about right or wrong anymore. This was about a mother saving her child. Inside the drawer were keys to all 7 of Mr. Harrison's cars, each labeled with the car's name and model. She grabbed the Ferrari keys and quickly locked the drawer again, replacing the small key in its hiding spot. So far, everything had gone according to plan. The garage was like a showroom. 7 luxury cars sat in perfect rows, each one polished to perfection. The red Ferrari seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Maria had never driven anything more expensive than her old Honda, but she had watched Mr. Harrison drive it a few times. How different could it be? She got behind the wheel and immediately felt overwhelmed. The interior was all leather and sophisticated technology. Buttons and screens everywhere, nothing like her simple car. She found the ignition button and pressed it. The engine roared to life with a sound that made her jump. It was powerful, almost angry. Maria took a deep breath and shifted into reverse. The car responded instantly, almost too quickly. She had to be careful not to hit the other vehicles as she backed out of the garage. Once she was outside, she pressed the garage remote to close it behind her. She was committed now. Driving through the neighborhood felt surreal. People walking their dogs or getting their morning newspapers stared at the expensive car. Maria kept her head down and drove slowly, trying not to attract attention. Every police car she passed made her heart race, even though she knew they had no reason to stop her yet. Her phone rang just as she reached the highway. It was Carmen calling from Mexico. "Maria, where are you with the money? The doctors are getting impatient. They say if we can't pay by noon, they'll have to move Miguel to a public hospital. But they don't have the equipment for his specific surgery there." "I'm working on it," Maria said, pressing the accelerator harder. "Tell them to wait just a little longer. I promise I'll have the money today." "What are you doing? You sound stressed. Are you driving?" Maria couldn't tell her sister the truth. "Don't worry about how I'm getting the money. Just focus on Miguel. I'll call you back in a few hours with good news." The contact her cousin had given her was named Roberto. He operated out of a garage in a rough part of the city, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions. Maria had never been to that area before, but her GPS guided her through increasingly run-down neighborhoods. She felt exposed driving such an expensive car in this area. People stared, some with admiration, others with suspicion. She parked outside Roberto's garage and sat in the car for a moment, gathering courage for what she was about to do. Roberto was a large man with tattoos covering his arms and a gold tooth that flashed when he smiled. He looked the Ferrari up and down like a buyer examining merchandise. "Nice car," he said, walking around it slowly. "What's the story?" "I need to sell it quickly," Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's an emergency," Roberto laughed. "They always are. You got papers?" Maria's heart sank. She hadn't thought about registration papers or titles. I left them at home. "But the car is real. You can see that." "Lady, I can't buy a car without papers. Too risky. Even for me." Roberto shook his head. "Bring me the documents and we can talk business." Panic washed over Maria. She had risked everything, stolen from a man who trusted her, and now she couldn't even sell the car. Miguel was running out of time and she was running out of options. "Please," she begged. "I have an emergency. My son is dying and I need $20,000 for his surgery. The papers are at home, but I can't go back there right now." Roberto studied her face. Something in her desperation must have convinced him she was telling the truth. "I believe you got problems, lady. But I can't buy this car. However, I know someone who might be interested in a temporary arrangement." He made a phone call in Spanish, speaking too quickly for Maria to follow completely. After a few minutes, he hung up and turned back to her. "My friend Carlos runs a small loan business. He says he can lend you $20,000 against the car. You give him the car as collateral, he gives you the money. You have 30 days to pay him back with interest or the car becomes his. But if you bring him the papers, he can arrange a sale instead." It wasn't ideal, but Maria didn't have any other options. $20,000 in exchange for 30 days to figure out her next move. Maybe she could convince Mr. Harrison to forgive her. Or maybe she could find another way to pay Carlos back. Right now, all that mattered was saving Miguel. "Where is this Carlos?" she asked. Roberto gave her an address across town. As Maria drove away, she realized she was getting deeper into a world she didn't understand. But every mile brought her closer to saving her son. And that was worth any risk. The afternoon sun was beating down when she finally found Carlos's office. It was in a strip mall between a payday loan store and a discount pharmacy. Not exactly the kind of place that inspired confidence, but Maria was beyond caring about appearances. Carlos was the opposite of Roberto, small, thin, and well-dressed. He looked like a businessman, which made Maria feel slightly better about the arrangement. "Beautiful car," Carlos said, examining the Ferrari. "Roberto told me about your situation. I'm sorry about your son. I have children too, so I understand." He offered her $20,000 in cash in exchange for leaving the car with him for 30 days. The interest rate was high, but Maria agreed immediately. She signed papers she barely read and took the envelope full of money. As she walked away from the Ferrari, Maria felt a strange mix of relief and terror. She had the money to save Miguel, but she had also just committed the biggest crime of her life. There was no going back now. Maria took a taxi to the nearest Western Union office, clutching the envelope of cash like her life depended on it. Her heart was racing as she filled out the forms to wire $20,000 to Mexico. The clerk looked surprised by the large amount, but processed the transfer without asking questions. She immediately called Carmen from the parking lot. "The money is coming. Check in about an hour. Tell the doctors to start preparing for Miguel's surgery right away." Carmen started crying with relief. "Maria, I don't know how you did this, but thank you. You saved his life. How did you get so much money so quickly?" "I'll explain everything later," Maria said, avoiding the question. "Just focus on Miguel now. Call me after the surgery starts." The taxi ride back to Mr. Harrison's mansion felt like traveling to her execution. She knew she had maybe a few hours before he discovered the missing car. She needed to think of a plan, some explanation that might save her from going to prison, but every idea seemed hopeless. When she arrived at the mansion, Mr. Harrison's other car was in the driveway. He was home earlier than usual. Maria's stomach dropped as she paid the taxi driver with shaking hands. Maybe he had already noticed the missing Ferrari. Maybe police were waiting inside for her. She entered through the back door and found Mr. Harrison in the kitchen making coffee. He looked relaxed, still wearing his jogging clothes from the morning. He smiled when he saw her, the same polite smile he always gave her. "Maria, there you are. I was wondering where you went. I came back from my run and couldn't find you anywhere. I had to run an errand," she said, trying to sound normal. "Family emergency." "I hope everything is okay," he said. And Maria could hear genuine concern in his voice. That made her feel even worse about what she had done. Yes, sir. Everything is fine now. Mr. Harrison nodded and poured his coffee. By the way, I'm having some business partners over for dinner tomorrow night. 8 people total. Do you think you could prepare something special? I know it's short notice. Maria agreed, even though she knew she probably wouldn't be there tomorrow night. She would likely be in jail or on the run. Mr. Harrison seemed to have no idea that anything was wrong. He chatted casually about the menu for a few more minutes before going upstairs to shower. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and cleaning. Maria went through the motions of her normal routine, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time her phone rang, she expected it to be police or Mr. Harrison demanding to know where his car was. But the calls were all from Carmen, updating her on Miguel's condition. The surgery had started in the early afternoon Mexico time. The doctors said it would take several hours, but they were optimistic. Miguel was young and strong, and they had caught the problem in time. Hearing this news was the first moment of real happiness Maria had felt all day. Evening came, and Mr. Harrison still hadn't noticed the missing Ferrari. Maria began to wonder if he even remembered he owned it. With 7 cars in his collection, maybe one missing vehicle wasn't immediately obvious. She allowed herself to hope that maybe she had more time to figure out a solution. Around 9 o'clock, Carmen called with the best news of all. The surgery was successful. Miguel is sleeping now, but the doctors say he's going to be fine. They repaired his heart, and he should make a full recovery. Maria collapsed in her small room and cried tears of joy and relief. Her son was alive. Her son was going to be okay. Everything she had done today had been worth it for this moment. But her relief was short-lived. Around 10:30, she heard Mr. Harrison's footsteps heading toward the garage. Her blood froze. This was it. This was when he would discover what she had done. She waited in her room, listening for sounds from above. First, she heard the garage door opening. Then silence for a long time. Then footsteps faster now, moving around the garage. More silence. Then the sound of the garage door closing. More footsteps, these ones heavy and quick, coming into the house. She heard Mr. Harrison on the phone. Yes, I need to report a stolen car. A red Ferrari, license number. He read off the plate number and gave details about the car to what sounded like a police dispatcher. Maria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She tried to think of somewhere she could run, but she had no money left and nowhere to go. Carlos had given her an envelope with $20,000, but she had wired all of it to Mexico immediately. The footsteps were coming down the stairs to the basement now. Maria sat on her small bed and waited. At least Miguel was safe. At least she had saved her son. Whatever happened to her now didn't matter as much. Mr. Harrison knocked on her door. Maria, can I speak with you for a moment? She opened the door and saw him standing there in his expensive robe and slippers. His face was serious but not angry. He looked more confused than furious. Maria, someone has stolen my red Ferrari. It was there this morning when I left for my run, but it's gone now. Have you seen anything suspicious today? Any strangers around the house? Maria looked into his eyes. This was her chance to lie, to pretend she knew nothing about it. Maybe she could convince him that someone else had taken it. Maybe she could delay getting caught long enough to figure out an escape plan. But looking at his trusting face, she couldn't do it. Mr. Harrison had been kind to her. He had never treated her badly or looked down on her. He deserved the truth. Mr. Harrison, she said quietly, I took your car. His expression changed from confusion to shock. You took it? Maria, I don't understand. Why would you take my car? Tears started flowing down her face. My son was dying. He needed heart surgery and I didn't have the money. I was desperate. I thought I could sell your car and save his life. Mr. Harrison stared at her for a long moment, processing what she had just told him. Where is the car now? I gave it to a loan shark as collateral for $20,000. I wired all the money to Mexico for Miguel's surgery. The surgery was successful. My son is going to live. They stood in silence for what felt like hours. Maria waited for him to call the police, to fire her, to scream at her for betraying his trust. She was prepared for anger, for disappointment, for consequences. But Mr. Harrison's reaction was not what she expected at all. Your son needed heart surgery? He asked quietly. Maria nodded, unable to speak through her tears. And you had no other way to get the money? She shook her head. Mr. Harrison ran his hands through his hair and sat down heavily in the chair across from her bed. Maria, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help? I couldn't, she whispered. You're my employer. I can't ask you for $20,000. That's not how it works. $20,000, he repeated slowly. You risked going to prison over $20,000? Maria looked at him in confusion. To her, $20,000 was an impossible amount of money. It represented years of savings, months of work, sacrifices she couldn't even imagine making. But she was beginning to understand that to Mr. Harrison, it might be something entirely different. Mr. Harrison stood up and began pacing in the small basement room. Maria watched him carefully, trying to read his expression. She had expected anger, threats, or immediate calls to the police. Instead, he seemed to be thinking deeply about something. Maria, you've worked for me for almost 2 years, he said finally. In all that time, you've never asked for anything extra. You've never been late, never called in sick, never complained about the workload. You've been completely trustworthy. Maria didn't know how to respond. His calm tone was more unsettling than anger would have been. And today you risked everything to save your child's life. He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Tell me about this loan shark. How much time do you have to pay him back? 30 days, Maria whispered. If I don't pay him back the $20,000 plus interest, he keeps your car. How much interest? $5,000. Mr. Harrison shook his head. $25,000 total for a car worth 10 times that amount. These people saw you coming. He sat back down and was quiet for another long moment. Maria could hear her heart beating in the silence. She wondered if he was deciding whether to call the police or handle this privately. Where is your son now? He asked suddenly. In a hospital in Guadalajara. He's recovering from the surgery. When was the last time you saw him? The question caught Maria off guard. She had been expecting more interrogation about the car theft, not personal questions about Miguel. 3 years ago when I came here to work. I've been saving money to bring him to America legally, but it's expensive and complicated. 3 years, Mr. Harrison repeated quietly. You haven't seen your child in 3 years because you came here to work and support him. Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. Mr. Harrison pulled out his phone. For a moment, Maria thought he was calling the police, but instead he dialed a different number. Robert, it's David Harrison. I know it's late, but I need you to cancel that police report I filed about the stolen Ferrari. No, I found it. It was a misunderstanding. Yes, I'm sure. Cancel the report tonight. I don't want any record of it. He hung up and looked at Maria again. Robert is a friend of mine who works with the police department. The report has been canceled. Maria stared at him in shock. I don't understand. Why would you cancel it? Because you're going to help me get my car back, and then we're going to fix this situation properly. Mr. Harrison's voice was firm, but not unkind. Tomorrow morning you're going to take me to this Carlos person. I'm going to pay off your debt and get my car back. But sir, that's $25,000. I can't ask you to do that. And even if you did, I could never pay you back. You're not asking me to do anything. I'm choosing to do it, and we'll figure out the repayment later. He stood up again. Right now, I want you to call your sister and check on your son. Then get some sleep. We have a busy day tomorrow. Maria felt like she was in a dream. This couldn't be happening. People didn't react this way to being robbed by their employees. Mr. Harrison, I stole from you. I betrayed your trust. Why are you helping me? He paused at the doorway and turned back to her. Maria, I've been wealthy for most of my adult life. I've met thousands of people who would steal from me for greed, for drugs, for gambling, or just because they could. But you stole from me to save your child's life. There's a difference. After he left, Maria sat on her bed in stunned silence. She called Carmen to check on Miguel, who was sleeping peacefully and showing good signs of recovery. Then she lay awake most of the night trying to process what had happened. The next morning, Mr. Harrison was waiting for her in the kitchen with coffee and a simple breakfast. He was dressed in casual clothes instead of his usual business attire. How did you sleep? He asked, as if this were a normal morning. Not very well, Maria admitted. I imagine not. Are you ready to go get my car? The drive to Carlos's office was awkward. Maria sat in the passenger seat of Mr. Harrison's Mercedes, giving directions to a part of town he had probably never visited. She kept waiting for him to change his mind, to decide this was all too complicated and just turn her over to the police. When they arrived at the strip mall, Carlos was waiting outside his office. He had obviously been expecting Maria to return alone, and his expression changed when he saw Mr. Harrison step out of the Mercedes. "Ms. Rodriguez," Carlos said carefully, "you brought a friend." "This is Mr. Harrison, it's his car," Maria explained. Carlos looked nervous now. He had dealt with desperate people before, but wealthy businessmen were outside his usual experience. "I understand you have my Ferrari," Mr. Harrison said directly. "I'm here to settle the debt and retrieve it." "Sir, your employee borrowed $20,000 against that car. With interest and fees, the amount owed is now $25,000. In one day?" Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an interest rate." Carlos shrugged. "Emergency loans are expensive. High risk, high cost." Mr. Harrison pulled out his checkbook. "I'll pay the $25,000. But I want a receipt showing the debt is settled in full, and I want my car returned immediately." Carlos hesitated. He was clearly hoping to keep the Ferrari, which was worth much more than the loan amount. But faced with immediate payment from someone who looked like he had legal resources, he decided not to push his luck. The transaction took less than an hour. Mr. Harrison wrote the check. Carlos provided a receipt, and the Ferrari was returned. Maria watched the entire exchange, feeling surreal. $25,000 changed hands as casually as buying groceries. On the drive back to the mansion, with Maria following behind in the Ferrari, she realized her problems weren't solved. She now owed Mr. Harrison $25,000 instead of owing Carlos the same amount. The debt had simply been transferred to someone who was being kind to her, which somehow made it feel worse. Back at the house, Mr. Harrison parked the Ferrari in its usual spot in the garage. He seemed relieved to have it back, running his hand along its sleek surface. "Beautiful car," he said. "I was worried I might never see it again." "I'm sorry," Maria said for what felt like the 100th time. "I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I am truly, deeply sorry." "I know you are." Mr. Harrison closed the garage door and turned to face her. "Now we need to talk about what happens next." They sat in Mr. Harrison's study, surrounded by his expensive books and awards. Maria felt small in the leather chair across from his massive desk. She expected him to hand her a payment plan or termination papers, but instead he seemed to be studying her thoughtfully. "Tell me about your life before you came to work for me," he said. The question surprised her. "Sir, I realize I know very little about you as a person. You've been taking care of my home for 2 years, but I don't know your story. Tell me about Miguel, about your family." Maria wasn't sure why this mattered, but she began to talk. She told him about growing up poor in a small Mexican town, about working in factories from the time she was 16. She explained how Miguel's father had abandoned them when the baby was born, leaving her to raise him alone while supporting her sick mother. She described the difficult decision to leave Miguel with her sister and come to America for work. The plan had been to save money and bring him over legally within a year. But immigration lawyers were expensive, and her mother's medical bills kept eating into her savings. "I send most of my salary home every month," she explained. "After rent for my room here and basic expenses, I can usually send about $1,500. But my mother's treatments cost almost that much, so I've never been able to save enough for the immigration process." Mr. Harrison listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "How much would it cost to bring Miguel here legally?" he asked finally. The lawyer said between $8,000 and $12,000 depending on complications. Plus I'd need to prove I can support him, which means having savings in the bank. "And how long has it been since you've seen him?" 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The exact count came out automatically, showing how often she thought about it. Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "Maria, I have a proposal for you. But first I need to ask you something important. If you had come to me yesterday morning and explained about Miguel's emergency, what do you think I would have said?" Maria considered the question. "I don't know, sir. I was too scared to try." "I would have given you the money immediately," he said simply. $20,000 is not a significant amount to me. I spend more than that on wine for a single business dinner." Maria stared at him. The casualness with which he said it highlighted the enormous gap between their worlds. "I understand why you didn't ask," he continued. "The relationship between employer and employee creates barriers. You saw me as someone who might fire you for having personal problems, not as someone who might help solve them." He stood up and walked to the window overlooking his perfectly manicured lawn. "But yesterday, you showed me something important. You showed me the lengths a mother will go to for her child. You risked your freedom, your career, your entire future to save Miguel. I had no choice, Maria said quietly. You had choices. You could have accepted that you couldn't raise the money. You could have hoped for a miracle. You could have tried to borrow from friends or family. Instead, you took action, even though it meant breaking the law and betraying someone who trusted you. He turned back to face her. That tells me something about your character. It tells me you're someone who solves problems, who takes responsibility, who doesn't give up when things get difficult. Maria didn't know how to respond to this analysis of her actions. Here's my proposal, Mr. Harrison continued. I'm going to pay for Miguel's immigration process, all of it. Lawyers' fees, documentation, whatever it takes to bring him here legally. Maria's heart stopped. Sir, I can't accept that. It's too much. I'm not finished. I'm also going to increase your salary significantly. Instead of working just as a housekeeper, I want you to become my personal assistant and house manager. You'll coordinate with other staff, manage my schedule, handle correspondence, and yes, still oversee the household maintenance. He named a salary that was nearly 3 times what she currently earned. This new position comes with health insurance, a retirement plan, and paid vacation time. It also comes with a small apartment above the garage, which would be perfect for you and Miguel when he arrives. Maria felt dizzy. I don't understand. Why would you do all this? Because yesterday showed me that I've been wasting your talents. Someone who can stay calm under extreme pressure, who can research options and execute a complex plan under a deadline, who can make difficult decisions when necessary. Those are exactly the skills I need in a personal assistant. He sat back down across from her. Maria, I've been looking for the right person for this position for months. I've interviewed dozens of candidates with impressive resumes and advanced degrees, but none of them have demonstrated the qualities you showed yesterday. But I stole from you. You borrowed from me under extreme circumstances and helped me recover my property within 24 hours. If you had come to me first, it would have been a loan, not theft. The only real difference is that you were too proud to ask for help. Maria's mind was racing. The opportunity he was offering would solve all her problems and more. She could bring Miguel to America, give him opportunities she had never dreamed of, provide for her mother's medical care without worry. What about the $25,000 I owe you? She asked. Consider it a signing bonus for your new position. The company will absorb that cost as a business expense. I don't have experience as a personal assistant. I don't have the education or training. Experience can be gained. Education can be provided, but integrity, dedication, and problem-solving skills can't be taught. You already have the most important qualifications. Mr. Harrison pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. I've already had my lawyer draft a contract. Look it over, think about it, and let me know your decision by tomorrow. Maria took the folder with trembling hands. The contract was several pages long, filled with legal language she didn't fully understand, but the salary and benefits numbers were clear enough. There's one more thing, Mr. Harrison said. I want you to take a week off starting Monday. Fly to Mexico, see Miguel, and make sure he's recovering well. The company will pay for your travel expenses. But the dinner party tomorrow night and your schedule next week, I can manage for a few days. You've been working without a break for 2 years. You deserve some time with your son, especially after what you've both been through. That evening, Maria called Carmen to share the incredible news. Her sister could barely believe what she was hearing. He's giving you a promotion after you stole his car? Carmen asked in amazement. He says it wasn't really stealing since I helped get it back so quickly, and he says he needs someone with my skills for a better position. Maria, this sounds too good to be true. Are you sure he doesn't have ulterior motives? Maria had wondered the same thing, but she had observed Mr. Harrison for 2 years. He had never been inappropriate with her or any other female staff members. He was strictly professional, almost formal in his interactions. I think he's just a good person who recognizes an opportunity when he sees one, Maria said, and I think maybe he understands what it's like to be separated from family. She had noticed that Mr. Harrison rarely had visitors who seemed like close friends or family. For all his wealth, he seemed lonely. Perhaps he understood something about sacrifice and isolation that made him sympathetic to her situation. The next morning, Maria gave Mr. Harrison her answer. She would accept the position with one condition. I want to work extra hours for the first few months to prove myself, she said. I know this is a big opportunity, and I want to show you that your faith in me is justified. Mr. Harrison smiled. the first genuine smile she had seen from him in 2 years. "Maria, I have no doubts about your work ethic. If anything, I'll need to make sure you don't overwork yourself." He handed her a business credit card and a company phone. "These come with your new position. Use them for any expenses related to your job, including your trip to Mexico next week." That afternoon, as Maria prepared for the dinner party, she felt like she was living someone else's life. 24 hours ago, she had been a desperate criminal. Now she was a personal assistant with a salary that would change everything for her family. The dinner party went perfectly. Maria coordinated with the catering staff, managed the service, and handled several small crises that arose without Mr. Harrison even knowing about them. She could see him watching her work, and she could tell he was pleased with what he saw. After the last guest left, Mr. Harrison found her in the kitchen cleaning up. "Excellent work tonight," he said. "You handled everything smoothly. I think this new arrangement is going to work out very well." "Thank you for this chance," Maria said. "I won't let you down. I know you won't. And Maria, call your son tonight. Tell him his mother is coming to see him next week, and that very soon he'll be coming to live with her in America." As Maria made that phone call later that night, she marveled at how quickly life could change. Miguel's excited voice on the phone, full of questions about America and when he could come, filled her heart with joy she hadn't felt in years. She had taken the biggest risk of her life, and somehow, it had led to the biggest blessing she could have imagined. 6 months later, Maria stood in the same kitchen where her nightmare had begun, but everything was different now. The space felt like home rather than just a workplace. Through the window, she could see Miguel playing soccer in the backyard with 2 neighborhood children who had become his friends. The immigration process had taken 4 months, but Mr. Harrison's lawyers had expedited everything possible. Miguel's arrival in America 3 weeks ago had been the happiest day of Maria's life. Watching him step off the airplane, healthy and excited, had made every struggle worthwhile. The apartment above the garage had been renovated before Miguel's arrival. It was small but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a kitchenette. For Maria, who had spent 3 years living in a basement room, it felt like a palace. For Miguel, who had never had his own bedroom, it was a dream come true. Mr. Harrison had been wonderful with Miguel from the moment they met. He had shown the 8-year-old around the mansion, let him sit in the Ferrari, and even taught him to play chess. Miguel, who had been nervous about living in a strange country, quickly developed a case of hero worship for the man he called Mr. David. Maria's new role as personal assistant had challenges, but she had adapted quickly. Her responsibilities included managing Mr. Harrison's calendar, coordinating with his business associates, handling his personal correspondence, and overseeing the household staff. The work was demanding but engaging, requiring skills she never knew she possessed. She had also started taking English classes in the evenings to improve her communication skills. Mr. Harrison had offered to pay for business courses as well, but Maria wanted to master her current responsibilities before taking on additional challenges. The relationship between Maria and Mr. Harrison had evolved too. While still professional, there was now a foundation of mutual respect and trust that hadn't existed before. He valued her opinions and often asked for her input on decisions. She had learned to speak up when she had ideas or concerns, rather than staying silent as she had in her previous role. One afternoon, while Maria was organizing Mr. Harrison's office, she found a newspaper article about immigration reform that he had clipped and saved. In the margins, he had written notes about families, separated by immigration policies and the economic impact of keeping skilled workers in lower-paying positions. She realized that her situation had affected him more than he had let on. He had seen firsthand how immigration barriers kept families apart and prevented talented people from reaching their potential. The article suggested he was considering donating to organizations that helped immigrant families navigate the legal system. That evening, as Maria was finishing her work, Mr. Harrison approached her with an unusual request. "Maria, I've been thinking about starting a scholarship program for the children of immigrant workers. The idea would be to help kids like Miguel access better educational opportunities. Would you be interested in helping me develop this program?" Maria was surprised but honored by the suggestion. "I would love to help, but I'm not sure I have the right experience for something like that." "You have the most important experience. You understand the challenges these families face. I can handle the financial and legal aspects, but I need someone who understands the real needs of the community. Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into researching scholarship programs and talking to other immigrant families in the area. She discovered that many talented children were struggling not just with college expenses, but with basic educational support during their high school years. The program they designed together would provide tutoring, college preparation, and financial assistance to immigrant children throughout their educational journey. They decided to start small with 10 scholarships the first year and expand if the program was successful. The first scholarship recipients were selected 3 months later. Maria was deeply involved in the interview process, helping to identify students who showed potential but needed support. One of the recipients was a 15-year-old girl whose story reminded Maria of her own struggles, working part-time to help support her family while maintaining excellent grades and dreaming of becoming a doctor. As the program launched, Maria realized how much her life had changed since that desperate day when she had stolen the Ferrari. She had gone from being someone who felt invisible and powerless to someone who was helping shape programs that would affect other people's lives. Miguel was thriving in his new environment. His English was improving rapidly. He was excelling in school and he had made friends easily. The heart surgery scar was barely visible now, and his doctors in America had confirmed that he was completely healthy. One evening, as Maria was helping Miguel with his homework, Mr. Harrison knocked on their apartment door. This was unusual. He typically respected their privacy and communicated through phone calls or meetings in the main house. "I have something for you," he said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a deed to the apartment above the garage. He had transferred ownership to Maria. "I don't understand," Maria said, staring at the document. "You and Miguel need security. This way you'll always have a home, regardless of what happens with your job. It's yours free and clear." Maria began to cry. "This is too much. You've already done so much for us. Maria, 6 months ago you risked everything to save your son's life. That taught me something important about what really matters. Money and possessions only have value if they're used to make life better for people we care about." He paused and looked at Miguel, who was pretending to do homework while obviously listening to the adult conversation. "Besides," Mr. Harrison continued, "I've grown attached to having you both here. Miguel's soccer games in the backyard, your questions about American business practices, even the sound of Spanish cartoons coming from your apartment on weekend mornings. It's made this house feel more like a home than it has in years." That night, after Miguel had gone to bed, Maria sat in her small living room and reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The desperate decision to steal the Ferrari had led to consequences she never could have imagined. What had seemed like the worst mistake of her life had somehow become the catalyst for the best thing that had ever happened to her family. She thought about the scholarship recipients and how the program might grow to help hundreds of families in the future. She thought about Miguel's opportunities in America and how different his life would be from what it would have been in Mexico. She thought about her own transformation from invisible domestic worker to trusted partner in philanthropic efforts. Most importantly, she thought about the kindness of a man who could have destroyed her life with a single phone call to the police, but instead chose to see potential where others might have seen only crime. The next morning, Maria found Mr. Harrison in the kitchen making coffee, just as she had that terrible morning 6 months ago. But this time, when he smiled at her, it was the smile of a friend, not just an employer. "Good morning, Maria. How's Miguel feeling about his first soccer game with the school team today?" As she answered his question and they discussed the day's schedule, Maria realized that sometimes the most desperate moments in life can lead to the most beautiful transformations. Her theft of the Ferrari had been born of desperation and love, but it had revealed something in both her and Mr. Harrison that neither had known existed. Looking back, she understood that they had both been living limited lives before that day. She had been trapped by circumstances and afraid to dream bigger. He had been isolated by wealth and missing the deeper connections that give life meaning. The crisis had forced them both to see beyond their defined roles and recognize each other as complete human beings with hopes, fears, and the capacity for both great sacrifice and great generosity. And in the end, that recognition had saved them both.